Okay, everybody. I'm trying this again. So I mentioned yesterday about lots of different kinds of parenting styles, and knowing about them leading me to this idea of innovative parenting. But I thought it might be helpful if I backtracked a little bit and talked about what some of these parenting styles are, because there are places where we want to integrate them into our own parenting, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you want to jump back into Psych 101, for those of you that survived that particular course, you might remember that they talk about four major types of parenting styles. They're authoritarian, permissive, neglectful, and authoritative. Authoritarian parents are just that. They're, think dictatorship, think ultimate rule, my way or the highway kind of parenting. I caught a snippet of TV recently in the gym. They had an old black and white sitcom on, and there was this moment where the dad, sent the child up to dinner, up to bed without dinner, and it was okay. Today feels like a real authoritarian parent. Permissive parents is another style of those classic four. And that's where you're very lax about your expectations. No standards. You're not asking particularly much of your children. It's sort of a live and let live attitude. This is the kind of parent that some children often wish that you were when they look at other kids who are able to have more privileges around a certain aspect of life. When you're saying no, but but Johnny's allowed to do that. An area that I hope nobody is wandering towards is this concept of neglectful parents, and those are the folks that we have to call Child Protective Services on from time to time because they're just not interested in their children. They're not being an active component of those of their lives, and it's really a I would say a scary place to be. And then sort of the gold standard around what we classically envision parenting styles is this idea of the authoritative parent, which is a combination of high demands in terms of those expectations and rules that you see authoritarians have, but it's blended with being highly responsive to the child's needs. And research over time has shown that to be a much more effective parenting style. Now, there are, of course, the other more modern parenting styles that have evolved over time. These, newer typologies that have moved their way into pop culture, a little less based on research, but still things that I think we think about when we're, talking about our parenting and are certainly part of the cultural milieu that surrounds parenting. One of the more prominent being this idea of the tiger parent, which comes from a book, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom, written by Amy Chua, about 6-7 years ago now. And this was, operating from a place of strength, expecting first-time obedience, very high expectations in terms of what the child would be doing, and in terms of behavioral performance. It does tend to have a little bit of alignment with authoritarian parenting styles if you're trying to match the classical typologies with these newer pop culture parenting styles. And it does certainly have a cultural component to it, which is why it may work in some family situations and not in others. Then there is the, so to speak, ever-present helicopter parent. You've got this, wonderful image in your head of a parent hovering over their child, I'm sure. This is, again, a relatively modern adaptation of ways of parenting. And we often called it overparenting as well. And I think a lot of times this comes from a place of anxiety, being worried about places where we may have struggled as a child, ourselves, whether it's over friendships or weight or academics, and really being over present for your child and not giving them the space. Colleges have really been frustrated with the idea of the helicopter parent and trying to create boundaries for them and not having that happen. So that's helicopter parent. And then we have the snowplow or bulldozer parent. I think maybe if you are in the frozen north, we might think of you as a snowplow parent. And this is a strategy of you're pushing obstacles out of the child's way. You're trying to make life easier for them. And this comes from a book called "You Are Not Special" by David McCullough, who was really pushing parents to just allow their kids to have the space to fail. And I've talked about the need to allow space for failure in your parenting on my blog in the past. It's something I'm sure we'll talk about here in the future. People fall into this because you've got this. We have this feeling that our children are special, and it mixes some authoritarianism and then also permissiveness in the mix in terms of those connections back to those old styles. No real research on this area. You can make your children feel safe and secure by doing this. But at the same time, you may be promoting a sense of entitlement because I've never run into any barriers, and you could be impacting the amount of resilience that they have, which is something that's really, really important for kids to have. Now, on the flip side, a parenting style that very much does promote resilience is the free-range parent. Not so much different from the free-range chicken. It really is based upon the idea of we're going to trust our children, and we're going to allow them to function in their environment without too many supports for them, and giving them some significant amounts of space to be independent. Now, this may be much more of a reaction to helicopter parenting and bulldozer parenting, in that we're trying to push away from that place of parenting through anxiety. And you may have heard sort of the classic story that this phrase of prearranged comes from a columnist who had let her 9-year-old son ride the New York subway, which as a parent of a 9-year-old, I just can't possibly imagine. But I don't live in New York, so maybe I could. I don't know. But the challenge with free range parenting, particularly when it comes to things in public, is that where you can come in conflict with the law. Here where we live, you cannot leave a child at home alone until they turn 9. And if you don't want to end up potentially with a child abuse claim over neglect, you may want to, at least as you attempt some free-range parenting, to be cognizant of where the law is going to overrule your parenting choices. Last phrase that's become popular as of late is this idea of attachment parenting. And it's based upon Bowlby and Ainsworth's research around attachment theory. You may have recalled the strange situation where they had a mother coming and going from leaving with a child and trying to see how the child would react to that scenario. And this is about the idea of building strong bonds between parents, caregivers, and their children. If you've done in an early time, they'll have happier and healthier relationships as they age. This is something that if you've read any of the Sears parenting books, it's certainly mentioned in there. And it's, it really does provide this nice cushion of love and engagement, which I think is really important. I think you have to be careful, as with any parenting approach, of going overboard and moving into that realm of permissive parenting, or on the flip side, also moving into the place of overparenting, where you're putting too much effort into promoting that sense of attachment, that bond between parent and child. So there you have it. That's a rundown of some of the current terminology for parenting styles. research still is very much focused on those classic four: authoritarian, permissive, neglectful, and authoritative. And perhaps in the near future, as these other terms start to take greater and greater sway in our vocabulary, we might see some psychology research coming out about them, but not much out there right now. So that pretty much brings us to a close for tonight. Next week, we'll be taking a look at executive functioning and organization. I'm going to be starting with just a short conversation about what the heck executive functioning is and what expectations you should have by age group and perhaps what expectations you shouldn't have, which I think is a trap that many of us fall into from time to time. So until then, happy parenting, and I'll be in touch.